Welcome to HazCom Training. This module is an introduction to hazard communication and GHS. Chemicals are often needed to help make many of the products we use. Incidents and injuries are always possible with hazardous chemicals. But by knowing their safety requirements, you can greatly decrease the risks. This training will help you understand chemicals and how to find information about their hazards. It covers how to work safely by following the hazard communication standard. When you're done with this training, you'll be able to describe how the hazard communication standard keeps you safe from the dangers of hazardous chemicals, identify who is responsible for determining a chemical's hazards, and recognize common hazards of chemicals you may encounter. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard requires your employer to inform you of the chemicals used in your workplace. It's often referred to as the HazCom standard. They must share each chemical's hazards and how to protect yourself from those dangers. The HazCom standard exists to help prevent injuries and illnesses. OSHA says that employees have the right to know and understand the hazards of chemicals they're exposed to in the workplace. The chemical manufacturer or importer develops hazard information for each chemical. That information needs to be documented and shared with each company and person who handles that chemical. This includes suppliers, transporters, and everyone to the final end user. Your employer has requirements. They need to provide you with the information and training necessary for you to do your job safely. Your employer must create an inventory of all hazardous chemicals at the workplace. They need to ensure each chemical has a safety data sheet, or SDS, that's easily accessible to all workers who are exposed to a chemical. They also must ensure each chemical container is properly labeled with an approved label. Your employer is required to create and provide training for workers. And they'll need to develop and maintain a written HazCom program that details plans for communicating chemical hazards and risks. The OSHA HazCom standard is aligned with the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, otherwise known as GHS. GHS is a worldwide accepted system used for the classification and communication of hazards. OSHA adopted the GHS hazard definitions, container label elements, and SDS format. Hazard communication begins at the chemical manufacturing plant. The manufacturer or importer must identify any hazards of chemicals they offer. Then, they must decide whether the chemical will be classified as hazardous. If the chemical meets this definition, the manufacturer or importer must then determine the degree of the physical or health hazard where appropriate. As a part of the HazCom standard, your employer is required to develop and maintain a chemical inventory. This is a list of all hazardous chemicals in the workplace. When a chemical arrives at your workplace, the hazard information is passed along with it. OSHA requires each company to keep a complete and up-to-date inventory of all its hazardous chemicals. This list makes sure all of the hazardous chemicals on site are identified. The HazCom standard defines hazardous chemical. This is any chemical which is classified as a physical or health hazard. It could be an asphyxiant, combustible dust, pyrophoric gas, or hazard not otherwise classified. A physical hazard can cause a fire, explosion, or some other violent reaction. Chemicals that threaten people's health are called health hazards. They can enter the body by inhalation, skin contact, or ingestion. These chemicals can affect your health right away or cause problems over a long period of time. There are several reasons why OSHA may consider a chemical to be a health hazard. It may be toxic. It may be corrosive or irritating to the skin or eyes. Some chemicals may cause an allergic respiratory disease. Others can cause cancer, birth defects, or reproductive issues. They can harm specific organs in the body or be harmful or deadly when inhaled. An asphyxiant is a gas that's essentially non-toxic but can cause unconsciousness or death. It does this by lowering the concentration of oxygen in the air or by totally replacing the oxygen in the air you breathe. Pyrophoric gases are substances that ignite spontaneously at room temperature. A combustible dust is any material that can burn rapidly when in a finely divided form. There are also some known hazards that do not fall into the established hazard classifications. So, OSHA created another category called HNOC, or hazards not otherwise classified. It's used to ensure all hazard information about a chemical reaches the end user. This introduction to HAZCOM and GHS was designed to help you understand how chemicals are identified in the workplace. It also covered the types of hazards some chemicals may present. Welcome to HAZCOM training. This module is all about GHS container labels. Chemicals are often needed to help make many of the products we use every day. Incidents and injuries are always possible with hazardous chemicals. But by knowing their safety requirements, you can greatly decrease the risks. This training will help you understand container labels and how to use them to stay safe when working with chemicals. When you're done with this training, you'll be able to describe how the Hazard Communication Standard keeps you safe from the dangers of hazardous chemicals, explain what information can be found on each chemical's container label, and describe how container labels can help you work safely with chemicals. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard requires your employer to inform you of the chemicals used in your workplace. It's often referred to as the HAZCOM standard. They must share each chemical's hazards and how to protect yourself from those dangers. The HAZCOM standard exists to help prevent injuries and illnesses. Your employer needs to provide you with the information and training necessary to do your job safely. The OSHA HAZCOM standard is aligned with the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, otherwise known as GHS. GHS is a worldwide accepted system used for the classification and communication of hazards. OSHA adopted the GHS hazard definitions, container label elements, and safety data sheet, or SDS format. Your safety depends on knowing how to identify and use the information listed on the label of each hazardous chemical. This will make you more confident in your ability to safely handle hazardous chemicals. Container labels are a quick guide to important information about the hazardous chemical. Fortunately, the HAZCOM standard requires all labels to include the same type of information. They must also be legible, written in English, and prominently displayed. Each label on a shipped container of a hazardous chemical must have 6 specific elements. The product identifier is the name or number used for the chemical. It can include an official name as well as any other names. The identifier used on the label must match the one found on the SDS. It also needs to match what is used in the workplace chemical inventory. The signal word tells you how dangerous the hazard is. There are 2 possible signal words. The danger signal word is used for more severe hazards, and warning is used for less severe hazards. A hazard statement describes the nature of the chemical's hazards. It may also include how dangerous the hazard is. An example of a hazard statement you may see on a label is, fatal if inhaled. The hazard statement is specific to the chemical hazard classification category. This means you should always see the same hazard statement for the same hazard classification category. It does not matter what the chemical is, or who produces it. Hazards may exist through exposure, improper storage, or handling. The precautionary statement describes ways you should minimize or prevent those hazards. There may be more than one statement listed, and you can also find these statements on the chemical's SDS. Precautionary statements address ways to prevent or minimize exposure to the chemical. Ways you should respond are also included in case of accidental spillage or exposure emergency. Information on storage and disposal of the chemicals is included as well. The supplier identification area includes a name, address, and telephone number. It identifies the chemical supplier, manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party. There are 3 hazard categories indicated by a graphic symbol, or pictogram, on the label. They are physical, health, and environmental. Each pictogram is used to share specific information about the hazard, and there are visual requirements. The symbol must be black. The background is white within a red outlined diamond. And a label may contain more than 1 pictogram. Although GHS uses a total of 9 pictograms, OSHA only enforces the use of 8. They include health hazard and flame. The exclamation mark is used for various hazards. You may see a gas cylinder or symbol for corrosion. There's also an exploding bomb, flame over circle, and skull and crossbones. The U.S. Department of Transportation, or DOT, requires different labels for the transport of chemicals. It's important to know that GHS pictograms do not replace the DOT labels. You may also see an area on the label with additional instructions or information. This is called supplementary information. It may include details like directions of use, expiration date, and fill date. It's very important you know how to handle hazardous chemicals properly. This will ensure your safety, and the safety of those around you. So, take these next steps seriously. You must familiarize yourself with each of the required elements on the label. Look at the label and identify the chemical before using it. Make sure it's truly the chemical you believe it to be. Be confident you know how to properly handle it before using it. No one wants an illness or injury. Do not use a chemical container that doesn't have a label. Follow the same rule if the label is incomplete or you cannot read it. Notify your supervisor immediately so a new label can be applied. There may be a time when you are unsure about how to safely handle a chemical. If this happens, reference the chemical's SDS for complete details. Your employer may use an alternative in-house labeling system. This may look different than the GHS-style labels. They must train you on that system. Ultimately, it's your responsibility to know how to handle each chemical properly. Using the labels allows you to immediately recognize the hazards and know how to safely handle the chemical. By doing all these things, you can avoid injuries and illnesses related to hazardous chemicals. Your employer must ensure that each container of hazardous chemicals in the workplace is labeled, tagged, or marked. There are two options. It can include all the elements required on shipped containers. Or it can show the product identifier and words, pictures, symbols, or a combination of these. This provides general information regarding the physical and health hazards of each chemical. Your employer must provide training on the type of label that's used in the workplace. Employers must ensure their workplace labels are legible and in English. Employers can add other languages to help. Labels need to be prominently displayed on the container. They can also be readily available in the work area throughout each shift. This module was designed to help you understand how to use container labels and stay safe when working with chemicals. Welcome to HazCom Training. This module is all about GHS safety data sheets. Chemicals are often needed to help make many of the products we use. Incidents and injuries are always possible with hazardous chemicals. But by knowing their safety requirements, you can greatly decrease the risks. This training will help you understand chemicals and how to find information about their hazards. It covers how to work safely by following a safety data sheet, or SDS. When you're done with this training, you'll be able to describe how the Hazard Communication Standard keeps you safe from the dangers of hazardous chemicals. You'll also be able to explain what information can be found in each section of a chemical's safety data sheet. By the end, you will be able to describe how safety data sheets can help you work safely with chemicals. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard requires your employer to inform you of the chemicals used in your workplace. It's often referred to as the HazCom standard. They must share each chemical's hazards and how to protect yourself from those dangers. The HazCom standard exists to help prevent injuries and illnesses. Your employer needs to provide you with the information and training necessary for you to do your job safely. The OSHA HazCom standard is aligned with the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, otherwise known as GHS. GHS is a worldwide accepted system used for the classification and communication of hazards. OSHA adopted the GHS hazard definitions, container label elements, and SDS format. Each SDS includes the hazard information developed by the chemical manufacturer or importer. SDSs are one of the most important tools to help ensure your safety. The SDS provides details to help you work safely with a specific chemical. This includes what it looks and smells like. The SDS also covers potential hazards and what to do in the event of an accident. Your understanding of the information provided on an SDS can mean the difference between being safe and being seriously injured or killed. Safety data sheets follow a standard 16-section format. Section 1 provides the product identifier. Section 1 helps you identify the product. It provides the product identifier, which must match the SDS. It includes the official name of the chemical, as well as any other names. It also shows the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party information. That includes the name, address, phone number, and emergency contact information. You'll also find the recommended uses of the chemical and restrictions on its use here. Section 2 identifies the hazards posed by the chemical, along with other information required to be on the chemical's label. This includes the pictograms, signal word, hazard statements, and precautionary statements. Section 3 provides details on the composition of the chemical. It shows the ingredients used to create the chemical, and which of those are known to be hazardous. It must also state if any information on the ingredients is being withheld as a trade secret. Section 4 covers the symptoms and effects of exposure to this chemical. This includes health problems that could occur right away or over a long period of time. It also describes the treatment methods you should use to help yourself or someone else who has been exposed to the chemical. Section 5 describes the combustibility of the chemical and any byproducts of combustion. It also covers the techniques and equipment that should be used to put out a fire if this chemical is involved. Section 6 lists the emergency procedures you should follow and the protective equipment you should use. It also details any special cleanup procedures whenever this chemical is spilled. Section 7 outlines the safe ways to work with and store the chemical. This includes a list of incompatible products this chemical should not come in contact with. Section 8 lists the chemical's exposure limit that's used or recommended. This may be shown as OSHA's permissible exposure limits, or PELs, the ACGIH threshold limit values, they're also called TLVs, and any others. It also covers the personal protective equipment, or PPE, and handling techniques required so you stay safe when using the chemical. Section 9 describes the chemical's characteristics, such as its normal appearance, odor, and solubility. Others include melting and freezing points, flash point, and evaporation rate. It will also identify the chemical's flammability, vapor pressure, and density. Section 10 describes how stable the chemical is, as well as the conditions that create instability. Section 11 covers the potential ways you could be exposed to the chemical and any related symptoms of exposure. It also details any acute and chronic effects that can result from overexposure to the chemical. It will identify how poisonous the chemical could be, as well as other potential health hazards. Section 12 describes how the chemical interacts with the environment. This section covers how long the chemical will last, how it spreads, and any other important information. Section 13 explains proper disposal of the chemical and its container. Section 14 includes instructions on the safe and unsafe ways of moving the chemical. It covers any applicable national or international laws, regulations, or standards that govern transport. Section 15 describes the safety, health, and environmental laws that apply to the chemical. Section 16 includes any other important details. It also tells you the date the SDS was prepared or last revised. This form helps anyone determine what to do, quickly and effectively, because it's the same layout for any chemical. While this is a lot of information, it's all clearly identified on the SDS for one simple reason. Following this guidance keeps you, your coworkers, and the environment safe. But, it's not enough to simply have an SDS on hand for every product in your chemical inventory. In order to be effective, an SDS must be kept up to date and be easily accessible to employees. Some companies store SDSs on a computer. Other companies may keep hard copies of SDSs on site. Be sure you know where to find your company's SDSs so you can properly respond to any potentially hazardous situation. Talk to your supervisor right away if you have trouble locating or understanding the SDS for a chemical. Never use a chemical until you have the information you need to use it safely. Be sure to read, understand, and follow the guidelines of the chemical SDSs you work with, so you know how to handle any situation that comes along. You can feel confident in your safety and the safety of those around you by learning as much as you can about hazard communication and the chemicals you work with. This module was designed to help you understand more about the Hazard Communication Standard and how the safety data sheet can help you stay safe when working with chemicals.
Employees working in general industry need to be aware of a number of workplace hazards. Depending on their specific job assignments, they may require training on forklifts, confined spaces, or hazardous chemicals, for example. Less well known are the training requirements for bloodborne pathogens. And while many employees may think this training is only relevant to those working in medical facilities, OSHA actually requires bloodborne pathogens training for certain employees in manufacturing, retail, hospitality, and other general industry establishments. The video-based training program, Bloodborne Pathogens: Safety in the Workplace, provides general industry employees with essential information about protecting themselves and coworkers. OSHA's Bloodborne Pathogens Standard requires training for employees who have occupational exposure. That is, it is reasonably anticipated that their work assignments will put them in contact with blood or certain body fluids called other potentially infectious materials, or OPIM, that can harbor microscopic disease-causing pathogens like the hepatitis B virus, hepatitis C virus, HIV, or others. This group of employees may include those who are trained and expected to provide first aid involving blood when an employee is injured at work, as well as employees who may be assigned to clean up blood or OPIM or dispose of contaminated items as part of their job duties. This is not to say that only those employees with occupational exposure should experience bloodborne pathogens training. For instance, for an employee in a job where exposure to blood or OPIM is not reasonably anticipated, this worker may still be tempted to come to the aid of someone with a bleeding wound. While training is not required for that employee, without such training, this Good Samaritan could be at serious risk for getting a bloodborne disease. And speaking of proper training, the video program puts special emphasis on warning employees about the risks of performing first aid as a Good Samaritan when they are not designated and don't have the proper equipment or training to deal with a bleeding wound. This may lead to a thorough discussion of these risks and the appropriate steps to take when an employee observes an incident. What's more, the video lists the steps to take should an employee suffer an actual exposure incident. These steps follow OSHA's requirements for washing and flushing exposed areas, reporting incidents to a supervisor, and getting medical attention immediately. As a trainer, this summary gives you a chance to explain your own exposure incident procedures, reporting methods, and available medical follow-up. In addition to requiring training at the time an employee is assigned to work involving occupational exposure, OSHA regulations require annual refresher training in the hazards of bloodborne pathogens and the protections you provide your employees. By using the training program, Bloodborne Pathogens: Safety in the Workplace, you'll be taking a major step toward OSHA compliance and protection of your employees. What are bloodborne pathogens? Bloodborne pathogens are bacteria, viruses, and other pathogenic microorganisms that are too small to be seen and can only be detected by sophisticated medical tests. These pathogens live in blood and certain other body fluids and can cause serious diseases like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, malaria, and Ebola, diseases that can make you extremely sick or even cause death. Anytime you come in contact with another person's blood, or what OSHA calls OPIM, other potentially infectious materials, you're at risk for becoming infected. OPIM includes the body fluids that have come to be associated with transmitting disease, like semen and vaginal fluids. But even body fluids like saliva, vomit, and urine are regulated as OPIM if they're visibly contaminated with blood. These pathogens can enter your system when an infected person's blood or OPIM comes in contact with your eyes, mouth, nasal membranes, or non-intact skin, including pierced skin or an open wound. OSHA is so concerned about bloodborne pathogens that the agency requires all general industry employees who are reasonably anticipated to come into contact with blood or OPIM as a result of their job duties to be protected. These employees have what OSHA calls occupational exposure. Among the diseases caused by bloodborne pathogens, currently only one of them can be prevented by vaccination: hepatitis B. If you have occupational exposure, for example, you're designated by your employer to provide first aid involving blood-related injuries, then your employer must offer the hepatitis B vaccination at no cost. You certainly have the right to decline the vaccine, but you should know that the hepatitis B vaccination is one of the most important preventative measures you can take. Work practice controls alter the way a task is performed in order to prevent infection. Think procedures like hand washing with soap and water, or routinely disinfecting surfaces. Other examples include engaging in the following safe work practices to reduce the possibility of cuts or skin punctures involving contaminated sharps. Never pick up blood-contaminated broken glass, metal shavings, or other sharp items by hand. Use tongs or a plastic scoop instead. Don't bend or break contaminated used blades. Dispose of contaminated sharp objects in a puncture-resistant sharps container designed for biohazards. Your employer may also restrict eating, drinking, smoking, applying cosmetics, and handling contact lenses in areas where a reasonable likelihood of exposure exists. Whatever type of PPE is made available, your employer must provide training in its proper selection, use, and disposal. Any break in the skin on your hands, a paper cut, a scratch, or even a hangnail can offer a route for bloodborne pathogen infection. For this reason, gloves are the most commonly used PPE. Housekeeping involves cleaning floors, work surfaces, and equipment. Visible contamination is easy to address because you can see blood or other body fluids on surfaces or equipment. But because bloodborne pathogens and OPIM can remain infectious for up to 7 days and may not be visible, you must take care to use EPA-approved disinfectants and techniques when cleaning in areas that are or may be contaminated. If you are designated to clean up liquid blood or OPIM, don't mop it up, as you may only spread it around by splashing. It's safer to use an absorbent. Absorbents and a small disposable scraper and dustpan are often included in commercially available body fluid cleanup kits. After the liquid is absorbed, carefully scrape the material into a dustpan before disposing of it in a biohazard bag or receptacle. You must also properly dispose of or decontaminate any tools you used to assist with cleanup. If disposal is not an option and you must disinfect equipment used during cleanup that has been exposed to blood or OPIM, do so in a sink dedicated to industrial use. It's a good idea not to use a bathroom, break room, or kitchen sink where employees will be likely to wash their hands, apply makeup, or clean dishes or food items. Remember, if your job duties put you at risk for contact with blood or OPIM, protect yourself by getting the hepatitis B vaccine, by taking universal precautions, and by using control measures. It's important to properly select and use PPE and follow recommended safety practices. Finally, be aware that signs, labels, and colors can alert you to biohazards. The key is to be prepared before you're called to take action involving blood or OPIM. That way, you can make the right decisions to safeguard yourself, your coworkers, and those who are closest to you.
Let's face it, workplaces can be dangerous places. That's why the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, requires your employer to first and foremost assess your workplace and identify all hazards and dangers that you face when performing your day-to-day job. Once these hazards have been identified, your employer will try to eliminate them or reduce them as much as possible. To help protect you from any hazards that remain, your employer will provide equipment to help keep you safe. You know this as personal protective equipment, or PPE. It's your employer's responsibility to determine what PPE you need based on the environment you work in and the type of work that you do, to provide the PPE to you, and to train you how to wear it, care for it, and use it properly. Although there are a few exceptions, in most cases your employer must provide you with the proper PPE at no cost to you. Once you have your PPE, it's up to you to wear it, and wear it properly. Think about it. If your employer is committed to your safety, you should be too.
So it's really important to help people understand, and people need to recognize for themselves that you've got to wear personal protective equipment before you learn the hard way.
As an employee, you have several responsibilities when it comes to PPE. First of all, you need to check your PPE daily to make sure it fits properly, is working as it should, and shows no signs of damage or excessive wear. Next, and this sounds way too simple, wear it. If you're required to wear PPE, there's no excuse for not doing so. Employees are often injured because they failed to wear their PPE or they wore it incorrectly. If your PPE is sitting in your locker or on a workbench, it's not doing you any good when you're working. If you're using a piece of PPE that's damaged or doesn't fit properly, that's not protecting you either. In these cases, inform your employer or supervisor immediately so your PPE can be repaired or replaced. We simply can't emphasize this enough. Wear your PPE properly during every work shift to ensure that you're protecting yourself as well as you possibly can. Finally, it's up to you to care for, clean, and maintain your PPE. PPE will take care of you only as long as you take care of it. Head protection is designed to protect you from impact or penetration hazards such as falling or flying objects, electrical shocks and burns, and even bumping your head against a fixed object. Sure, that might sound silly, but it happens more often than you think. Hard hats are classified by the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, and are rated on the type of protection they provide. They're marked inside to show the approval. Type 1 hard hats are specifically designed to prevent impact to the top of the head, while Type 2 hard hats prevent impact to the top of the head and from the side. The outer shell of a hard hat is designed to absorb impact and resist penetration by deflecting objects from hitting your head. The inner suspension system assures a space between the shell and your head to absorb the impact and provide a secure fit. It spreads the force of impact over a wider area of your head. It's important to adjust the headband so the hard hat won't fall off, but still provides a comfortable fit. Adjust the chin strap if your hard hat is equipped with one. That may be the case if you do overhead work or if you work at heights. Some hard hats are even equipped with other safety gear, such as hearing protection, a face shield, or a lamp.
Just because there's a cage above the forklift doesn't mean something can't fall through the cage and hit you in the head. Well, our head is the most precious part of our body, so this is why we wear the safety helmet.
There are 3 classes of hard hats. Class G general hard hats offer good protection from impact hazards and exposure to low voltage. Class G hard hats are used primarily to protect workers from falling objects and flying debris. You should wear this type of hard hat if there are people working above you who may drop tools or materials. Let's hope they don't, but it could happen. Class E electrical hard hats are electrically insulated and protect against high voltage shocks and burns. These hard hats are commonly worn by electrical workers and by those who work on or near exposed energized parts. Be aware, however, that there's a limit to the amount of voltage protection these hard hats offer. The hard hat you're using must be rated for the voltage you may be exposed to. Finally, Class C conductive hard hats are used for general service and offer no voltage protection. These hard hats are usually worn by those who have no electrical hazards to worry about, such as workers in manufacturing areas. Class C hard hats are mainly used to protect you from impact or from bumping your head on objects, like when you're working in tight quarters where there's low overhead clearance or where you could hit your head on obstructions. Keep in mind that hard hats do have limits on how much impact and penetration protection they can provide, in addition to limits on electrical protection. Always follow the manufacturer's directions on how to wear your hard hat. Don't wear it backwards unless it's been approved to be worn that way. And if you need a hard hat liner, wear one designed for that purpose, not a baseball cap or a bandana. The hard hat you wear should offer you the best protection for the job you do. It needs to fit properly and must be snug enough to comfortably stay in place. There should also be proper clear space between the suspension system and the shell. Be sure to wear it properly according to the manufacturer's recommendations and inspect it every day before putting it on and starting work. If your hard hat is cracked or shows other signs of damage or excessive wear, replace it. Don't apply stickers or paint unless the manufacturer says it's okay to do so. Some materials can weaken the shell or the electrical insulation. For similar reasons, don't store the hard hat where there's direct sunlight or excessive heat. If your hard hat takes a solid blow, replace it after the impact. Obviously, you don't want to take any chances when it comes to protecting your head. Your eyes and face are among the most exposed parts of your body. Eye and face protection is designed to protect you from a wide range of hazards, including flying chips and sparks, dust, splashes, and even glare, to name a few. Safety glasses are the most common type of eye protection and are usually worn in general work environments while using tools, grinding, woodworking, and masonry. They primarily protect you from impacts with flying fragments, large chips, sand, and dirt. Glasses with side shields provide additional protection all around your eyes. Regular glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses don't provide any eye protection, so always wear safety glasses. Some models are designed to be worn over regular glasses. Safety goggles protect against sparks and impact hazards. They offer the best protection from chemical splashes. They're designed to fit tight and close to your eyes and face and provide more thorough protection than safety glasses. Some models are designed to fit over your prescription glasses. Goggles provide some ventilation to help keep them from fogging up. Use goggles with indirect ventilation for splash hazards. Face shields and welding helmets are designed to provide full protection for your face, but you should never use a face shield as your primary eye protection. A face shield should only serve as secondary eye protection, and you should always wear safety glasses or goggles under a face shield. A face shield is intended to protect you from severe impact hazards, along with hot sparks, splash from molten metal, and chemical splashes. It's commonly used when very hot items, chemicals, or light radiation are involved. Eye and face protection is designed to meet ANSI standards. Lenses and frames are marked to show ANSI's approval. Follow company rules to wear eye and face protection properly. Sometimes you can be required to wear eye protection in certain areas regardless of your activities at the time. Make sure your eye protection fits comfortably, provides clear visibility, and is appropriate for your job. Straps, temples, and headbands are adjustable to ensure a comfortable fit. When cleaning your eye protection, flush the lenses with clean water before wiping them. Inspect them regularly for signs of damage, and replace them if they don't fit properly or if they no longer provide adequate protection and clear vision. Replace pitted, scratched, or broken lenses. Finally, store your eye protection in a clean, dry place.
Now your eye is extremely important because unlike other body parts where you get cut, a laceration, and it will heal, your eyes, if it gets injured more often than not, you can find yourself in a bad situation for a long period of time. Your eye won't heal. Your eyes do not recover.
You might not think much about hearing protection while on the job because industrial noise might not seem like an obvious hazard. Hearing loss can be tough to notice because it happens gradually. If you don't use proper hearing protection, the long-term effect on your hearing can be drastic.
So when I work with people with hearing loss, it's really often that I like to talk about the 4 Ps. Hearing loss is painless, it's permanent, it's progressive. You don't know that it's even happening, but it is preventable.
Sound is measured in decibels. For example, a normal conversation is about 60 decibels, while the average factory produces about 70 to 90 decibels or more. Running a belt sander produces about 100 decibels. That's enough to cause significant hearing loss over time. In fact, just 1 hour of belt sanding at 100 decibels is equivalent in noise exposure to 8 hours at 85 decibels. 2 effective ways to protect your hearing are limiting your exposure to loud noises, either the noise level or the amount of time you're exposed to it, and by using hearing protection to decrease those noise levels. If you're exposed to noise levels of 85 decibels or above, your employer is required by OSHA to reduce the noise level, provide you with the proper hearing protection, and implement a hearing conservation program. That program will include monitoring the noise level, notifying employees of the monitoring results, and audiometric testing of your hearing. OSHA requires this testing be conducted within 6 months of the noise exposure and every year after that. During the test, a technician sends tones through earmuffs to find the softest level you can hear at various sound frequencies.
So the reason we do a hearing test annually is because as hearing changes, it happens in really small increments. And our brain is so good at adapting, it gets used to that. And we don't really realize it's even happening.
Hearing protection devices include a noise reduction rating, or NRR, on the package. The higher the rating, the more noise the device blocks out. There are 3 main types of hearing protection. We'll start with earplugs, which provide the best protection against constant noise exposure. That's because when inserted correctly, earplugs will form to your ear canal and provide a good seal. Earplugs can be either disposable or reusable. When using earplugs, your hands need to be clean and dry. Aside from being unsanitary, if dirt or grease on your hands gets transferred to your earplugs, they may become uncomfortable and loose in your ear canal. When inserting them, shape the earplugs according to the instructions. You'll need to lift your ear up and back to open your ear canal properly and ensure a snug fit. If you don't get a snug fit, you won't be getting the best protection. The second type of hearing protection is headband plugs, which are sometimes called canal caps. You might use these if you're exposed to temporary or intermittent noise, like machinery that gets turned on and off frequently. As you can see, headband plugs can be inserted and removed quickly. But they don't fit as snugly in the ear as earplugs do because they don't form to the inside of your ear canal. They also don't provide the same level of coverage as do earmuffs. Earmuffs are good at blocking out noise because they cover your ears completely. But earmuffs require a perfect seal to be effective. Glasses, long hair, or long sideburns can prevent a proper seal. Facial movements like chewing can also reduce the protection level. Earmuffs are appropriate if you wear hearing aids. Regardless of which type of hearing protection you use, make sure you wear the type of protection that's both comfortable for you and best suited for the work that you do. Always read the manufacturer's instructions and wear the hearing protection properly. Wear your hearing protection whenever and wherever your employer requires it, even if the environment doesn't seem that loud. And wear that hearing protection even if you're hearing impaired, to protect your remaining hearing.
It changes people's lives. When you're not able to hear and not able to communicate as easily, and by simply using that hearing protection that's already there for you to use, you can really save your hearing, because once it's gone, you're just never able to get it back.
You may have some coworkers you don't always like listening to, but protect your hearing so you can hear them when you want to or need to. An oxygen-deficient atmosphere can kill you, and airborne contaminants that you can't see, feel, or smell can damage your lungs and other organs. That's why respiratory protection is so important. Respiratory protection is intended to protect your lungs from harmful airborne contaminants, such as mist, dust, gases, vapors, or fumes, or from atmospheres that have low levels of oxygen. That's why it's crucial to wear respiratory protection in those oxygen-deficient environments and in areas where hazards can't be sufficiently reduced by ventilation. When air contaminants are at hazardous levels, OSHA requires your employer to have a written program for respiratory protection, to ensure that you're medically able to wear a respirator, to train you in how to use the right respirator for your type of work, and to conduct a fit test to ensure your respirator fits properly when you receive it, and at least annually after that. You'll need to do a seal check each time you put on a respirator with a tight-fitting facepiece. Use your hands to cover the mask's air inlet area. Then gently inhale. The mask should collapse slightly when you inhale. Next, cover the mask's air outlet and exhale gently. The mask should bulge slightly. If the respirator fails the seal check, adjust and reposition it on your face. Then repeat the check until you have a good fit. Report to your supervisor if you can't get a good seal. You might need other adjustments or a different respirator.
At our restoration company, we take personal protective equipment very seriously, in particular respiratory protection, in that we can come across some serious situations that require high levels of respiratory protection. Every year we have a designated day for respiratory protection fit testing day that all of our employees are required to attend.
There are 4 main styles of respirator facepieces. An elastomeric half mask covers your nose and mouth. Dust masks also cover your nose and mouth, but they're made entirely of the filtering material. A full face mask seals around the face, all the way from the forehead to the chin. These 3 are examples of tight-fitting facepieces. They fit tightly, but should be fairly comfortable. Also, you can't wear a tight-fitting mask if your beard, mustache, sideburns, or eyeglass temples interfere with a good seal. Keep facial hair trimmed so it doesn't interfere with your respirator. There are lens inserts available for full-face respirators if you need to wear glasses. The 4th style of respirator is a hood or helmet, which is loose-fitting and surrounds your entire head. Respirators also have 2 main types: air purifying and atmosphere supplying. All respirators must be approved by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. An air purifying respirator removes contaminants from the air through a filtering or chemical absorbing element, a particulate filter, a canister, or a cartridge. Of the air purifying type, particulate filter respirators are commonly used in jobs like cutting, welding, sanding, grinding, spraying, and cleaning. They're designed to protect you from dust, mist, and fumes. A dust mask is the most common type of particulate filter respirator. An air purifying respirator with organic vapor cartridges is commonly used for working with solvents, such as acetone. There are many other types of cartridges and canisters for other types of vapors and gases. An atmosphere supplying respirator provides clean, breathable air from an uncontaminated source. This type of respirator would be used when the nature of the airborne hazard isn't known, or when the oxygen level falls below 19.5%, or when an air purifying respirator doesn't provide enough protection. There are 2 types of atmosphere supplying respirators. A supplied air respirator supplies clean air from a line attached to an air compressor. The air line restricts the wearer's movement. However, the respirator can be worn for an unlimited amount of time. A self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA, supplies clean air from a tank or canister that is carried with the worker. This allows for freedom of movement, but restricts the amount of time the wearer can work in the area due to the limited supply of air. Remember, it's your responsibility to wear the correct respiratory protection in all areas designated by your employer. Keep your respirator clean, be certain it fits properly, and watch for damage, missing parts, or wear and tear. Imagine what life would be like if you suffered a severe burn, cut, or chronic skin disease on your hands. Not only would it affect your ability to work, but it could also make everyday life at home much more difficult. That's why it's so important to wear the proper hand protection to safeguard against a variety of injuries. Gloves, of course, are the most common type of hand protection, but there are many types and styles of gloves to choose from. The key is to select the proper gloves for your work environment. Metal mesh and Kevlar gloves protect you against cuts and scratches from knives. Leather gloves are your best option for protection from extreme heat and cold, and they will also protect against minor cuts and abrasions. Fabric and coated fabric gloves are both designed to protect you from dirt and abrasions. The coated fabric gloves provide a better grip. Thin rubber or latex gloves protect against dermatitis, germs, and pathogens. These are commonly used when administering first aid and should be disposed of after each use. When you're done with them, carefully remove them by the cuff rather than the fingers and turn them inside out as you remove them. If the gloves are contaminated with blood, they'll need to be disposed of properly. Chemical-resistant and liquid-resistant gloves are designed to protect against chemical burns and irritation from chemical exposure, such as allergic dermatitis. When working with chemicals, you need to know specific details about those chemicals in order to choose the right glove for the job. Check the chemical safety data sheet or the glove manufacturer's chemical resistance chart for the recommended glove material, such as neoprene, nitrile, or natural rubber. Keep in mind there is no single type of glove that protects from all chemicals. Always use the proper glove material as instructed by your employer. Finally, insulated gloves are designed to protect you from electrical charges. Be sure to choose the right glove for your work environment, and in some cases, you may need to layer more than one type of glove to get the adequate protection you need. You should wear the proper foot protection if there's any chance of something sharp or heavy falling onto, rolling over, crushing, or puncturing your feet. OSHA requires that safety shoes and boots meet the standards set by ANSI or the American Society for Testing and Materials, or ASTM, for protection against those hazards. Safety shoes and boots are marked on the inside with a stamp or label to show what hazards they're approved for. Safety shoes and boots may include features such as protective toe guards. These protect your toes from impact and compression from heavy or sharp objects. But beware, there's a limit to how much protection they can provide. Thermal insulation for working in hot and cold environments. Insulating soles to protect against electrical hazards. Again, there are limits on how much voltage protection they provide. Choose protective footwear that provides adequate protection for your work environment. Conductive and static dissipative soles to prevent static charges that could damage electronic equipment or cause an explosion. And steel insoles to protect the bottom of your feet from punctures. Additional protective options based on your work environment may include metatarsal guards, instep protection for the top of your feet, rubber or plastic safety boots for protection from water, oil, acids, corrosives, and chemicals. Tight-fitting elastic gores, which allow for a tight fit and quick removal. These come in handy in foundry work, where sparks or hot metal could get inside the boot. And strap-on cleats for added traction.
I have seen someone have a broken toe because they were standing next to a forklift and the driver didn't have it in park, and when he hit the gas, the unfortunate employee had her toe run over. You know, she wasn't wearing her safety toe covering. She thought, oh, I'll just be in and out of the warehouse real quick, no big worry. So, well, that was, 4 weeks of rehab, a cast, and then light duty for a while.
We have a lot of customers that come in with stories about how actually having the protective toe has saved them or their foot. I've seen pictures. If they hadn't had the boot or shoe on, they would have lost their foot. So we hear a lot of different stories, more so that the boot having the protection saved their foot.
Your protective footwear needs to be comfortable and needs to be worn properly. Know what your shoes or boots are designed to protect against and know their limits, and inspect them every day to make sure they're in good condition and replace them if they're damaged. All of these tips can help you avoid foot injuries on the job. Knowing and wearing the right kind of PPE can minimize the risk of hazards that can't be eliminated. Be sure to use personal protective equipment correctly. Follow all the manufacturer's instructions and your company's procedures. Understand the limits of your PPE's protection. Keep it clean and store it properly. Make sure it's in good working condition, and if it's not, contact your supervisor and have it repaired or replaced. Taking a little time each day to follow these guidelines will help keep you safe on the job, prevent long-term damage, and promote good health and well-being.